Taoiseach, why were funds intended for supporting rural Ireland from the EU redirected to climate measures? In 2021, Ireland received €365.5 million from the EU to spend on supports for Ireland's economy in mitigating the impact of Brexit. Ireland was the biggest beneficiary of Brexit funding, as we were the worst affected by Brexit. The funding that Ireland received was to contribute to improving living standards, support economic growth in the country and mitigate the negative impacts of local communities. Through a government source, I have learned that a request to the EU Commission was sent asking to transfer 150 million of the Brexit Adjustment Reserve (BAR) funding to support the rollout of climate measures. What are the biggest crises in Ireland currently? Surely it's housing. So why can you not direct the funding basically into housing infrastructure? I've asked for this to be done for the last 3 years, and you just stood up there a few minutes ago and you asked for this side of the house to help. I am a building contractor. I've been a building contractor all my life. I understand building, I understand infrastructure, I understand how to build houses and other properties. And you said yourself that the answer to this is to build social housing. And Taoiseach, I agree with you. Minister Darragh O'Brien was in Limerick recently announcing houses that were built in social houses. And we went around to 5 different areas and we looked at the areas. It started in Partick's Well where 110 houses were being announced, but the infrastructure in Partick's Well is under pressure where they're looking for funding. We then went on to hospital, where there was 20 new houses being delivered, and I'm thankful for that. I've been asking for them, but 5 of the houses had on-site sewerage systems because there was no capacity. You've asked me for help. I am giving you my advice on something that I know because I live and breathe it every day. The answer to the housing crisis is infrastructure. The answer to the housing crisis is infrastructure, and I'm saying it a second time. And in Limerick, up to 40 years under the government of Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and Labour at the time, he failed to invest in infrastructure. If I have infrastructure, I will deliver the houses, you can take the recognition for it and I will give it to you. Give me the funding to put in infrastructure in Limerick and we will have no housing crisis in Limerick.
Thank you, Deputy. Taoiseach.
Thanks, Deputy. There are a number of different funds that are operated by the European Union through the European Commission, and there are very strict rules around those funds. So one of those funds is the Brexit Adjustment Reserve Fund. Ireland secured just over €1 billion from that fund, but we are limited on how we can spend it. So, for example, we are able to spend it on upgrading our ports facilities, and we've done that in Rosslare and other ports around the country. We are able to spend it on fisheries, and a lot of the money has gone to the fishing industry. We would have liked to spend a lot of it helping business, for example, and also the agricultural sector, but in order to do so, you have to demonstrate that those businesses have lost their profits or gone into the red solely as a consequence of Brexit. And given the increased trade that's occurred between Britain and Ireland, the performance of business and rising incomes, it didn't fit the criteria. So when you don't spend money from one fund, you can move it to another fund. And the fund that we've moved it to is another fund called the European Recovery Fund. And you can't spend that on housing, Deputy, but you can spend it on things, for example, like retrofit. And that is one of the things that we've decided to divert the funding to. And that will be of benefit to the construction industry because it is the same people who carry out a lot of that work. In relation to funding for infrastructure, you're absolutely right that for a very prolonged period of time, when this country had no money, we weren't able to invest adequately in infrastructure. And that is one of the things that's holding us back. And you're right about that. But where are we now? A housing budget this year of €4.5 billion, the highest ever, and an infrastructure budget this year of something like 14 billion euros, the highest ever, higher than the European average, higher than many of our peers like the Netherlands and Denmark. There is no lack of money for new housing, or for infrastructure. The constraints are different ones. They tend to be around planning, they tend to be around the availability of labour, and they tend to be around the availability of materials. And they're the bottlenecks that we're trying to fix.
Thank you, Taoiseach. But what are you going to tell the people for the last 40 years in Eskeaton, Ula, Hospital, Kilfinnan, Drumculloher, Patrick Swell, Ballingarry, Eskeaton, Abbeyfield and many more around County Limerick when those promises were made of upgrades of sewerage systems so we could build houses and infrastructure 40 years? I do accept that you said there's money available now. Well, will you give it to Limerick so we can build houses? Give it, and the other thing is I'm looking at is when we look at departments, and especially when we're looking at city-based departments, when they give funding to Limerick, and recently there was specific projects given to Limerick, 2 million came to Limerick. How much of it came to the county of that 2 million budget for specific projects? 25,000 euros came to the county. The rest went into the city. Where is equality for Limerick County and city together for us to build? So when you give me the money for infrastructure, I will build the houses. I will make sure that all the builders, and there will be local employment for everyone to build houses, and we will give you the recognition for it. But first you've got to give us the funds to do it, and you haven't done it in the last 40 years.
Thank you, Deputy. Taoiseach.
Thanks, Deputy. Irish Water has a capital programme. It's over €1 billion a year, and that is there to provide water and wastewater to free up lands for housing. And understandably, they prioritise those sites where the most housing can be delivered first, and that makes sense from my point of view. But there is a specific programme for small towns and villages to allow them to have the water services they need to allow for natural increase. And I believe that every town and village should be able to increase its population and have natural increase. And we will be sitting down with Irish Water over the course of the year to see if we can provide them with additional funding to service more sites. But again, as I said earlier, the bottlenecks that we face in Ireland are no longer lack of money. We've never had a bigger budget for housing than we have now. We've never had a bigger budget for health than we have now. We've never had a bigger budget for investment in public infrastructure than we have now. The constraints are different ones. They're planning, they're the availability of labour, they're the availability of materials. And they're the bottlenecks that we need to solve.
Thank you, Taoiseach.